to the drawing board for the Sumar Street Redevelopment Project in West Ashley. I talk one-on-one with City of Charleston Councilman Karl Brady for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook and follow me on the Palmetto Network. City of Charleston Councilman Karl Brady, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks for having me again, Quintin. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Needless to say, you're a councilman for Outer West Ashley and Johns Island, and I know that obviously you're coming up on 4 years on City Council. And of course, as you know, Charleston City Council is tackling a lot of issues, including, of course, the Sumar Street redevelopment. As you know, that's located right there at Northbridge, Charlestown Gateway, which is a site of a 2.5-acre parcel of land located at the central point of West Ashley. The site was once home to, obviously, Piggly Wiggly. And after a 5-year period of vacancy, the city actually purchased the property on August 8th, 2017, for the price tag of $3 million. The Piggly Wiggly structure was demolished in May of 2018 and leaving the property in its present state. A lot of ripe for the redevelopment and revitalization, as you know. And since the city's acquisition of the property, city and county officials have collaborated with community members and civil engineers to envision different possibilities for this particular space.
That's right.
As we sit right now, Councilman, what is the current price tag for this particular redevelopment?
So, City Council debated the three options that were put forth, which all had different price estimates. But the one that I was in favor of, as well as 6 other council members, was right around $45 million. And the bulk of that was going to come from the cost to construct an underground parking garage on the site, which the underground parking garage would have served several purposes on that site. First, to park cars, obviously. But second, it could have worked as a water storage facility in the event of a major storm. Water could have been stored on the site and then pumped out afterwards. So there was a measure of flood control there as well. The other thing it would have helped is to open the site up, because by parking the cars underneath, you allow for more space, open space on the project. And so I really liked it. I thought, especially because it would have been self-funded from the tax increment financing district that runs along the spine of St. Rittenberg Boulevard, it would have jump-started the redevelopment going down St. Rittenberg, and have people see that, this was a kind of shot in the arm for that area, that the city was serious about investing. It would have had civic space for city offices, such as our West Ashley coordinator being able to be based in West Ashley. Okay. A civic meeting space where we could hold, when council goes on the road for some of our meetings, we could have held it there. West Ashley Revitalization Commission could meet there. We could have DRB meetings out there. And it would have given us that kind of component, but it also would have had office and retail and restaurant space. And a lot of the feedback that I got from my constituents here at Outer West Ashley and Johns Island was that they wanted to see something similar to the Pacific Box and Crate project that's downtown on King Street Extension, right, and believe that West Ashley was worthy of that investment. This is where most of the city lives. The majority of the population is in West Ashley, and sometimes perception becomes reality, but the perception was that they and their tax money has gone downtown, created a vibrant tourist scene, vibrant economy downtown, and they wanted to see the city turn around and at least invest some of that into West Ashley. And as I said, the money was already available in the TIF district, so it wasn't going to be coming out of anybody's pockets, like an average homeowner or taxpayer or anything. It was going to be self-funded from the TIF, and as redevelopment moved down and those properties become more valuable, there's more you can do in the TIF as well. So I was really disappointed when it failed in a 6-6 vote, but it's going back to Community Development Committee this month for some more input from those committee members, and we'll have to see what they come up with.
Now, Mr. Councilman, let me ask you this. You talked about the open space for that project. What is the overall open space for that right now?
So there were 2 kind of main open space areas that option 1 envisioned, which was a civic green space on the project that would have the ability to have a stage at one end if we did outdoor concerts, if you think of it that way. But also because the parking would have been underground, the small surface parking lot could be cordoned off if they wanted to do food truck rodeos or something like that. So you really had kind of two main components to activate there. The small above ground lot, but then also the civic lawn, where you can imagine if they're not doing outdoor concerts, kids are out there running around and playing and that type of thing. And it's, the way it was positioned with the buildings, it's guarded from Sam Rittenberg Boulevard, so there wouldn't have been, a traffic concern or anything with the lawn being adjacent to that. So, like I said, I really liked the setup. I thought it was a world-class project for West Ashley, but unfortunately, we'll have to go back and see what comes out of it now.
So with option one, what would be the ideal height for that?
It was capped at 3 stories for some of the larger buildings, and then scaled down to 1 depending on where it was on the site.
How many large buildings would be on that project, for instance?
So if you think of the retail, restaurant, office space building, those could go up to 3. But then like the civic buildings and stuff, because the extra height's not needed, would be 1 or 2. And it just depends on how it was going to get positioned there on the site. But I believe the 3-story ones were the ones fronting Sam Rittenberg Boulevard. So it would have been 1 or 2 that would have reached 3 stories in height.
Now, Councilman, you talked earlier about obviously this potentially could have been a flood storage location. So do you envision the City of Charleston creating a pump station there?
Not at this time. If it had been part of the project, obviously that would have been incorporated, because that was part of the goal, was to go even above and beyond the Dutch dialogues on this site, and use some of the kind of fundamental water storage techniques that we wanted to use as kind of a champion and a proof of concept, if you think of it that way. That we have the stormwater standards as a minimum, but there's other things above and beyond that can be done as well. And since the city would be investing in that project, we wanted to be a leader in that.
Now, what can the city go above and beyond when it comes to this project?
So on the stormwater side, as we talked about, if there was an underground garage, that being able to storm water, that goes above and beyond anything that the Dutch dialogues would have required. The site would have had a water feature. It would have had detention tanks to store water on site as well. So that it doesn't do any harm to any of the properties surrounding the area. And I think that's an important thing to emphasize, is that the new stormwater standards for the city require that instead of proving just that your site does not flood, which is what the old standards did, the new standards require that you do no harm to the watershed, in terms of your site can't make runoff or anything worse. And so, we didn't want to have any impacts for Ashley Landing, which Faison owns, and we didn't want to have any negative impacts for the neighborhoods around it as well. And so the site was designed with that in mind, and which is why I said, to kind of go above and beyond to make sure that there was the ability to store water on that site. And then in the event of a hurricane or something that came through like that, we could store additional amounts on it as well, which would improve the resiliency of the site.
Now, how much water would you all be storing in that particular location?
So the initial, for the stormwater standards, it's whatever the site displaces. So that would be stored on site. But then, like I said, if we'd had the underground garage component, some of that water could be brought on and we could carry additional capacity, which I thought, again, was just a really neat way to look at, if the city was going to invest in that site, it was going to go above and beyond what the private sector might necessarily do alone.
So what would the private sector do and what would the city do?
So on your traditional site, for stormwater, you're storing whatever the site displaces. But because the city investment in that project, we wanted to make sure that we could add additional capacity to the detention capabilities. And then that way, there's an ability to recover faster in the event of flooding due to storms, or, we've had thunderstorms that kind of bring more rain than initially anticipated, especially in certain spots. And we'd be able to contribute in that way to that area, because, we treat that as the gateway to West Ashley. Like, you're coming from North Charleston, you're coming from out of town, and you want to head that way. It's that site there is one of the first things you see when you get into the city of Charleston and West Ashley. And, we wanted it to both be beautiful, but also have functional components as well.
And what other functional components do you all envision, or ideally?
So in talking to my constituents,
Yes, sir.
We wanted to see kind of a vibrancy return to that area. And, I think park space and open space is important, but I don't think the whole site should be a park, especially just because of where it's positioned. There's not a ton of great pedestrian access in that area, which we are working on in coordination with the county and the state. But you wouldn't want kids running across St. Wittenberg Boulevard or across Old Town Road to try and access it. So I don't know that a park site would have been completely functional in that area. So that's why it had the civic lawn and the ability to open up the parking lot for events as well, was so that there is the ability to have open space there. The front would have had a water feature, which obviously, being near the Ashley River, the water feature kind of ties into the natural topography of the land there and the water. And so I thought it did a really good job of trying to incorporate all of the feedback that we had gotten over the last 5 to 6 years from citizens. And then obviously it was purchased before my time on council, but it's been one of kind of the defining things that people have asked me about. They are tired of looking at the concrete pad every time they want to go up there. And, I had mentioned when I spoke during the council meeting that, when you ride up and down the San Wittenberg corridor, there's a lot of shopping centers there that probably in the 70s and 80s when they got built made a lot of sense. Very, very car centric, parking lots in the front, buildings in the back. But when you think of a streetscape and what creates an inviting thing for people to come to, tons of parking in front of retail that's set back several hundred feet from the road. It doesn't activate the sidewalk. There's not a lot of incentive to walk or bike to those destinations. And so we were really hoping that this project would show kind of a proof of concept that this mixed-use development can work in West Ashley. And you began to see that with what Faison, the developer that owns Ashley Landing, was looking at, that they were going to, as a result of what the city had proposed for the Sumar Street site, they were going to go in and redevelop their plaza, which would add more money to the TIF because the property would become more valuable as well as a result. And so I viewed that as a really positive sign that what we were looking at was already starting to spur some redevelopment. And I differ with some of my colleagues on council. There's been talk about maybe the city selling the property back to Faison, who was the original owner. But as my colleague, Councilmember Rappel, said, the private sector solution for that site was a 20-pump gas station. And I don't know that the market incentive to do that may still exist. I'm not an economist. But we wanted to make sure that that site became something that not only the city could be proud of, but the residents could be proud of, and something that we hoped, would be featured in some of the things that get advertised for the city. That it's not just downtown Charleston. Like, there are other areas of the city that can be featured that people will want to come to. You can think of a city like Tampa, Florida, where they invested a lot in their downtown redevelopment, but there's also a lot of other parts of Tampa that people go to, like Ybor City.
Sure.
And so we want to be able to create that kind of vision for West Ashley and for the city.
So, I mean, hypothetically speaking, council member, when you think about that the underground parking garage,
it could be underwater as part of the design. I mean, that's
with that underground garage. So then, what are the market incentives for that now that you have that as an idea?
So that's part of the what I will say is the difference between the private sector and a public-private partnership with public investment. The financials just for the private sector to take it on, don't make sense. And I think, most people understand that it is cost prohibitive. The cost per space, which is one of the metrics used for parking garages. But when you look at the cost of an above ground garage, which was option 2, it was only about $8 million less for an above ground garage than an underground garage. And so when you're talking about the funding mechanism that we would have used through the TIF, $8 million divided out over 30 years is really not that much more of a cost per year. And that would have been a charged site in terms of you would have paid to park in the underground garage. Similar to the way, if you think of the above ground garage in Mount Pleasant that's on Coleman Boulevard, over near Shim Creek, where you have to pay to park that site in the garage if the surface parking's full. It would have been a similar component where you would park in the underground garage. It would have been charged. And so there would have been a revenue generation component there to take care of the cost overrun, or not cost overruns, but the additional cost of maintaining and parking that site. Because we do require, as part of our development ordinances, that you do have enough parking for your site. And so, the city wanted to make sure we took the lead on that. And I thought the underground garage was a inventive way to do that. It's not something we have a lot of in this area, but because of where that site is, it is built up slightly, and so there is the ability to go slightly underground there, which was the original idea.
So where exactly would surface parking be in that area?
So that was option 3. That would have been a total parked surface parking site. It would have reduced the footprint of the building significantly, and also restricted the height that you could have done there. And so there have been some talks with Faison, who owns Ashley Landing Plaza, but those will be going forward to talk about if we could come up with a park share agreement with Faison for that site, because I think we have to acknowledge, and I think both parties, or the three, the city, Landmark, and Faison, when the city, if option or something similar to option 1 gets built on that site, there's a natural synergy between the two sites where you would have, people parking and going to Frothy Beard, or they want to go pick up some groceries, but they're going to go grab a bite to eat first. And so they're going to park over near the Publix, but then walk over to Sumar and go grab dinner or go see a concert. Like, there was going to be some natural synergy there. And so I think that still has to be worked out between all the parties, whether there could be some shared parking agreements, but that would greatly increase the amount of people that could utilize that site, which is good for everybody.
And when you talk about that shared parking agreement, council member, how much would the city put in, and how much would these other investors put in?
So that hasn't been determined yet. That obviously have to be a negotiated component for whatever Faison decides, the cost per space is for them. And then there's some other calculations that go into it in terms of if we had a shared parking agreement and the Sumar site could utilize the parking during certain hours, then obviously there would be a revenue component that would have to go back to Faison, because you're essentially renting the parking space.
Sure.
And then that type of thing. So those are all kind of a little bit down the road, because I think everybody kind of wants to see where the city settles on the vision for the Sumar Street project, and whether it's some kind of tweaked version of option 1, or if it's a park, or if it's an above ground parking garage like option 2 would envision. But I think that's something that community development is going to try and handle, and come up with something that meets most, if not all, of the standards that we've kind of set for the site. Because that was one of the things I honestly think that Landmark and Leolio, the architects, really tried to incorporate was, when you go through such an extensive public feedback process like we went through with this site for 5 years, and you have, people wanted restaurants, they wanted retail, they wanted office there to be near where people live, but they also wanted park space. Yeah. And, it's really tough to get all of that wedged into a triangular shaped site that's at the nexus of 2 major thoroughfares in West Ashley.
So what would you tweak now to option 1 if you had the opportunity?
That's a great question, Quintin. I still really liked the original version of option 1. Obviously it was a very narrow defeat, failing 6-6 with Councilmember Seekings being absent that day. So there's good support for it, and I think the question becomes, if cost is the factor that motivated some people to vote against the project, where can we look at kind of scaling down a little bit of the cost to make it more comfortable for them so that some people wanted to see not as much money from the TIF going into that project, and so I think if we could scale down a little bit, maybe we go from 3 stories to 2 stories or something like that. I think that could probably be an acceptable solution, where the site still gets activated, you still get the open space, and we could still go with the parking solution or the underground garage, because I still think it's a really unique solution for that site. But we'll see what can bring the cost down a little bit to assuage some of those council members, and see if we can move forward, hopefully here sometime soon. Because that's the other thing that was important to note about the original option 1, was it had already received DRB approval from the design review board. I had gone through technical review committee, so it was the most shovel ready of the 3 of them. And that's the unfortunate thing with construction costs rising, as we know that they do. Further delays on this project will just make it more expensive in the long run.
Okay, I want to get back to that in just a second, council member. But let me ask you this. Okay, so the Sam Rittenberg TIF, how much money is the city generating from that right now?
So not as much as one would expect, because there hasn't been as much redevelopment down Sam Rittenberg yet. And I think Councilmember Rappel really hit that point home during the debate a few Tuesdays ago, when he talked about, and I completely am on board with his thoughts as well, when we're talking about West Ashley redevelopment, we're not talking about some beautification projects as like the final finishing touches. We're talking about it needs significant capital infusion to really set the tone and set the pace for redevelopment in West Ashley. If you look at Citadel Mall, we've given that site as much zoning and height adjustments as we can to really make it enticing for people to want to redevelop, but that site hasn't come through yet. And that's why it was really promising that the Sumar Street site, with the city working as a public-private partnership, you saw, like I mentioned earlier, you saw that with Faison wanting to come to the table to redevelop their plaza. So you'd see more money going in, but the TIF would have had enough money to cover the city's contribution for the Sumar Street project, but it would have had to have waited for some other redevelopment projects to come about and raise the value in order to increase the TIF going forward.
So what's the property value of that Sumar Street project now?
That's a good question. So with the current zoning, we could definitely sell it for slightly more than we paid for it, just with the real estate market being the way that it is. But we wouldn't walk away with a significant amount to then turn around and try and redeploy elsewhere. And that's one of the things that I think concerns me the most, if that was an option that some of my colleagues wanted to go down the road with, was that just selling it and then pocketing any difference that we had in the appreciation of the property, I don't think would accomplish the goals that we've set out for that area. And so, I would not be in favor of selling it. I am in favor of redeveloping it. And I think the civic component and the civic buildings and the meeting and assembly space is an important aspect for me, because when the city of Charleston was just on the peninsula, it made sense to do everything downtown. But now that the city has grown and we're on James Island, Johns Island, West Ashley, and Daniel Island, it makes sense that we start having space where we can house employees, so that they're not having to use city vehicles, which have their own kind of maintenance costs, to get everywhere, when they could just be based out of space that's closer to the areas that they serve. And then also, I think that there's something to be said for when we have meetings and the ability to go have them at places other than City Hall. It really helps bring government to the people, that it's not just a bunch of us, 13 of us on the second floor of City Hall, maniacally making decisions for people, that we can have a space that we can go out and talk, and civic groups could rent, neighborhood associations could hold meetings there. Boy Scout troops and Girl Scout troops could hold meetings there. And so it is really, I think the civic component for me really would have given that kind of bringing the government to the people, which I think helps people realize that their money is being best utilized, but that also, we want to go where they are and find out what their concerns are.
And I hate to be redundant, but silly with this question, but Councilman, if you were to rezone the Sumar Street property, how much would the property value be then?
I don't know. I'm not a real estate agent, but it currently has pretty generous zoning for that site, just given where it is.
Yeah.
And so, it wouldn't be used for any type of industrial use or anything like that, but definitely a general business or limited business component there, which is our highest and most intense uses for the property from a business perspective. And so, that site's always going to have a good real estate appeal, just given its proximity to major transit corridors. And so that's why it was unfortunate when the private sector wanted to put the 20 pump gas station there, because I think the neighborhoods around there and my colleagues even before me on council saw that that probably was not the best use. It was appropriate under the zoning for the site, but it was not the best use of that property, especially for the neighborhoods around that. And so, the site's going to continue to grow in terms of its appreciated value. But, like I said, I'm not interested in selling it. I think that there's a use there that we can come to an agreement with, hopefully.
Now, if and when this particular garage is built, hypothetically speaking, how much money would the city need to keep the building intact and keep it actually from cracking and from the water coming in?
That's a great question. So I'll be completely frank. The city has not been the best at what we would call deferred maintenance. But that was what got brought up during the debate. But the fact that it is located in the TIF district, if it gave the shot in the arm that we were looking for, then there could be some dedicated funds from the TIF to help maintain the site. And so that was kind of the original thinking, was that it being the project that would spur the redevelopment, and there would be city-owned assets there that we could use the TIF to help fund that, which is not unusual for other TIFs that we have in the city. Being able to use them for maintenance of city assets in the TIF that help with spurring on economic activity.
Okay. And this might be a silly question too, council member. So when the Faison folks get the, Ashley Landing Mall, redevelopment done there, would that also be a separate TIF district?
That is currently in it's currently in the same TIF district. So when their redevelopment project goes forward and the county reassesses it,
right,
that new value will be help contribute into the TIF, and that was kind of the thing that, at least in my mind, when we announced the original option one kind of concept, they got excited, announced their plans that because of that, they were going to redevelop their site. And we were hoping that that would then move down the spine of Sam Rittenberg as other kind of aging plazas looked at, well, we now have to compete for space in these newly redeveloped plazas that people may want to frequent more than some of the ones that need a little TLC. And so, those plazas would hopefully have looked at some revitalization efforts. And also I would add, as part of the Faison project, they're also going to put a residential component on that site in the form of apartments.
Okay.
And so you really, on the Sumar Street and Ashley Landing Mall site, you would really have a interconnected mixed use where you have people who can live there in the apartments. They can frequent the Publix, they can frequent any of the businesses in Ashley Landing, but they also would have been able to go to the Sumar Street site. And it was my hope that that kind of concept would move down Sam Rittenberg, where you currently have a lot of the large concrete asphalt parking pads. That space could be better utilized to add housing in that corridor, and do a mixed use style development there, where we can add a little bit more density in that corridor, which would activate more of those plazas. And you're seeing a lot of that go on now in the city. A lot of PUDs, planned unit developments,
right,
are incorporating the kind of commercial at the road frontage rather than being at the back. And you put the apartments in the back with the retail on the side fronting the road.
Right.
And then that really begins to open up the ability to have pedestrian connection to the businesses while allowing the retail businesses to absorb some of the road noise and that type of thing and keep the residences in the back. So it's just a different way from when these shopping centers and everything were constructed 40, 50 years ago. Just a different way to think about it, but you're still operating on the same components. And this is something I've harped on for years. I've talked about it in this election cycle since I'm up for re-election in November. When you have a concentration of people that don't have retail, it significantly adds to traffic because people have to travel to go do their daily business. But if you can locate retail near where people live, it actually cuts down on the amount of traffic because if people can walk to one of those retail locations or it's a shorter commute for them to get there. And I'll give you the example of on Bees Ferry Road, where the new Harris Teeter complex had gone in a couple of years ago. There was some real concerns in the area about whether that Harris Teeter was going in the complex with it, with the restaurants and stuff, was going to generate too much traffic at the Grand Oaks Boulevard and Bees Ferry Road intersection. I go up there all the time. It's about 2.5 miles from my house. And any time of day, it's fairly easy to get in and out of that site because you have basically a concentration of about 10,000 people that live within 2 miles of that area. Oh. So you're on the road for maybe 5 to 7 minutes at the most, and then your car's parked on the site, and you're not adding extra time to get to a different grocery store where, it may have been prior to that construction, 20, 25 minutes for me to get down to the Avondale Harris Teeter or over to the Sam Rittenberg Harris Teeter. And by cutting 18 minutes of me being on the road, like that is less cars. And when you think about as many people that are utilizing those restaurants and the grocery store, they're not out on the road. And so I think it's a way that people don't necessarily think of things. Like they think of development as always being bad, and that there are definitely some development things that I've opposed, especially where I don't think they make sense. But in a lot of cases, bringing retail to where people live is a way to help reduce traffic and solve that issue. But also, if you have a primarily commercial corridor, bringing where residents can actually live also reduces traffic because you have people that can live there that don't necessarily have to drive to go utilize them.
And I know all about tropical smoothie, but let me ask you, where ideally would a putt be on Sam Rittenberg?
So I think on a lot of those aging plazas that kind of connect between Sumar down Sam Rittenberg to near Citadel Mall, sure. I think there's a lot of opportunity there because a lot of those parking lots are quite large. And those owners of those plazas could request a rezone for a PUD. And I think it's important for your listeners to kind of understand what a PUD is because we throw it around a lot. We assume everybody knows what it is. But it's really a custom zoning for a site, and it allows the city. The reason that the city likes them is that the owner of the site has to sign a development agreement with the city, and it allows us to hold them accountable to the site as opposed to just being able to build under. If it was just general business, there's a table of uses that says general business includes X, Y, and Z. And you can by right build whatever's in the table of uses. But if you do a planned unit development that has the mix of retail and commercial, and you say that we're going to do, I'll give you an example. If the developer said we're going to build 160 units of apartments on the site and they signed the development agreement, well, that's what they're held to. They can't go above that. Like they have to build what they've signed the development agreement for. Whereas if they were just building by right under a general business zoning, they can build whatever the maximum allowable density is on the site. And so we, myself included, at the city, really like planned unit developments because it allows us a degree of control. We can negotiate. and it gives more uses that we can kind of want to see for an area or a particular site than we would just necessarily get if it was just being built under the existing zoning.
So how many businesses, I'm looking at a lot of them right now, from the bridge all the way down to Orange Grove and beyond, but how many of those businesses are under that general business zoning?
I believe most of those plazas are. If they're not general business, then it would generally be like limited business, which just helps dictate the hours that they can stay open. But most of them, I think, are GB,
Yes.
which allows for, it's the most intense use of the site. And so, that's why I think, like I said, I think if they were going to redevelop, the city would be looking to do some mix of residential and commercial on those sites, as a way to kind of spur development. And you see when you travel to other cities, this concept is not unfamiliar, where you could even redevelop some of those sites to have ground floor retail with 2 and 3 story apartments above them. Exactly. And that helps maximize the site. And also, doesn't require, and I've had this conversation, and it's something I'm trying to hammer home on the campaign trail a little bit.
Okay.
Like, Charleston is a very desirable destination. We're ranked number 1 in the world in several publications to come and visit, and people like to come and visit. They like what they see, and then they want to move here. And if we as the city are not being proactive, looking at options where we can maximize, as I mentioned, with like ground floor retail, with residential on above, or street facing residential or street facing commercial with residential in the back, those apartments and houses are going to get built somewhere outside of the city of Charleston. And then those people still need to drive to work and drive to do things. And so I've tried to make the economic and traffic argument that not all residential development is bad. And in a lot of cases, locating it near destination points will help cut down on the amount of traffic that's generated. And so, you'll see me argue there's a development coming on Bees Ferry Road that we've negotiated a planned unit development with, that'll have some commercial along Bees Ferry down towards the intersection with Savannah Highway, as well as a residential component in the rear. And and it's across from another development that already has a grocery store and some restaurants and a dry cleaners. And so that will be a little self-contained community there. But if we don't put our residential there, that developer could decide they just wanted to go to Ravenel and build it. And then that's going to add more traffic on Savannah Highway, leading into the city. And, that's not something I want to see. I'd rather see those tax dollars stay here and be invested here. And I think that's something that, we have to realize, as elected officials, is if we deny, certain types of residential building, the developers are just going to go find a municipality that they can build in, and then it's just going to continue to add to the traffic problem. So we have to be forward thinking, and provide better leadership and lead from the front on this.
I wish I had more time, but Zoom is only giving me less than a minute. But I hope to get you back in the fold so we can continue this conversation about that, as well as Sumar Street, and what you talked about earlier about obviously residential on the top and ground level on the bottom business, which they have in Nashville at 5th and Broadway. But for right now, City of Charleston Councilman Karl Brady, thank you for your time here on Quintin's Close-Ups.
All right. Thank you, Quintin. I appreciate it. Have me back anytime.
Thank you. Thank you.